Welcome to the special edition of To The Point. Today our guest is Professor Swadesh Mahajan. Professor Mahajan has been a distinguished plasma physicist for more than 30 years at the University of Texas in Austin. So Swadesh, it's nice to have you here. Now you have done something which is rather new and might change the whole energy scenario for nuclear energy. Right? So before you start, can you tell us very quickly what is your objective? And then we will get to how you're going to do it.
Well, first of all, one has to appreciate that nuclear energy is one of the most important base load sources for electricity, that is dependable, non-intermittent. Okay? So the question is that our growing energy needs, how are they going to be met without doing any damage to the environment and other things? So nuclear energy is a great candidate. So we already have nuclear energy, right? There are so many reactors which are operational, and this current available mode of energy production, it's called fission. Okay? Fission is wonderful, it's a wonderful technology, very dependable, very safe. With modern science and engineering, it can be made almost as safe as possible. But as you know, it's in the nature of energy production that nothing comes free. Whenever we produce nuclear energy by the standard reactors, we do produce a fair amount of what's called nuclear waste. Now these are some materials, isotopes, which do not get consumed in the process. Okay? And they have long-term radioactivity, biohazard, etc. So if we really want the society and the environment to accept nuclear energy in a big way, then it's extremely important that we somehow find an appropriate method of destroying, disposing, whatever word you want to use, this nuclear waste. So what we have done.
Let me ask you something just to be clear about this. So you have a way in which you will take nuclear waste, which comes from conventional reactors, which we really don't know what to do with, so it keeps collecting on the planet and it's very toxic. And you have a way in which you can convert a lot of this waste into fuel, by which you will be able to destroy the waste and convert it into fuel, and that will make for a huge energy change. Now I would like to know in a simple way how you're going to do this.
Okay, so along with this current mode of energy production, which is fission, there is a sister nuclear channel which is called fusion, right? Fusion is not yet a technology. It's a long way to become a technology. However, fusion does have a very interesting product which everybody knows is called neutron. And these neutrons are extremely important for us to be able to use along with fission to be able to destroy the nuclear waste which a normal reactor produces. Okay? And so fusion by itself will not be producing energy, as everybody knows that fusion is an extremely difficult thing to accomplish, and fusion is a process which all of us know is what exactly how the stars produce their energy. But you know, the stars are huge, massive, they can keep these particles together, and we don't quite know how to put them together for sufficiently long periods of time to produce energy. However, the application for cleaning the nuclear energy from its waste, that is relatively easier. So what we have been able to do is to combine these two technologies, get fusion to produce neutrons and use those neutrons to take care of this fundamental sin of nuclear fission, that is the nuclear waste. But as you said very correctly, that fusion neutrons can also be used to produce and breed fuel. Okay? So there are twin advantages. You get rid of waste, you convert it into energy, and then for the next reactor, for the regular reactor, you take what is called a fertile material like uranium-238 and convert it into useful fuel. And in both these things, the system that we have created is extremely efficient, okay, and therefore economical. But in order to get there, we had to do lots of inventions, because Normally, a
Okay,
fusion reactor is
let
big.
me just simply ask you that you have recently got a patent for this process, which means the community of experts, which is engineers and scientists, have actually gone and looked at your idea
Right.
and seem to have decided that this idea is something that is amenable to engineering.
Yes.
And so can you just tell us in a little way how this idea will work?
Okay, very good. The way it works is that a typical fusion reactor is huge, and to combine it with a fission reactor in order to get all these things that we talked about done is an absolutely challenging proposition. So before we came on the scene, right, it was very unwieldy and it was very interconnected. So therefore, it was almost impossible for an engineer to give, go ahead sign. So what we did, we made the fusion source to be very compact. Okay, so compact that we can slip it in and out of a fission reactor, and then we can combine them. Each is being constructed separately. Okay, separability, modularity, smallness of the fusion neutron source is really the key to being able to accomplish this marriage so that the progeny comes out to be much better than either of the parents. Okay, so the whole idea there is how did we make it so compact? After all, if it was trivial, anybody else could have done it. For that, we had to redesign the so-called magnetic bottle in such a way that the enormous amounts of particles and heat flux which will come from a device like that, very intense, it would have burnt all materials. So you do really need agents like the magnetic field to appropriately take them out. So we redesigned the outer portion of this magnetic bottle. The inner portion is very good already. Okay, and this is what we call super X diverter.
Okay, so Swadesh, it's time for a small break. We will be back soon. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV. So welcome back, and we are talking to Dr. Mahajan. So Swadesh, where we left off is that you were telling us about the magnetic bottle that you've designed, which seems to dissipate the enormous amount of energy in a manageable way and produce these neutrons, these special neutrons because they are high energy neutrons. So now you please tell us how you produce these neutrons, how many you produce, and how they destroy the nuclear waste and convert it into fuel.
My God, that's a tall order, right? But let's see if we can handle these questions one by one. The idea is that fusion is created when two isotopes of heavy hydrogen are combined. A nuclear reaction takes place, neutrons come out, and so does energy. But in the fusion-fission hybrid, which we are emphasizing today, the energy of the neutron is not as significant as the fact that it's a neutron, because neutron is the agent which we need, which will go and help the waste material from the fission, because you need neutrons to convert the waste material into something which can be again fissioned and converted into energy. Similarly, neutron is the agent which can pick up what we call a fertile nucleus like uranium-238, which doesn't naturally fission, converts it into something which can fission. So not only you take the waste, convert it into an appropriate fuel and fission it, you take in fact a non-fissionable material and convert it into something which the other reactors can use. Now what happens is that the device that we have created, it has a sufficient ability to produce neutrons that one of these devices, the fission-fission hybrid, can produce fuel for about 5 to 6 normal running reactors, and it can destroy the waste of 20 of them. Because if it was 1-to-1 ratio, you will have to change the nuclear industry entirely and nobody is going to do it. So in fact, the idea that we have such large support ratio for these new devices, it brings them to the realm of reality, to economics, and of course the engineering feasibility is that it's small and compact, okay, and when it needs some repairs, I can pull it out, take it to a remote bay and repair it.
So let me sum this up. So you have also an economic proposition, and you have a mechanical proposition which is simple, that it can be replaced, and then you will tell us a little more about it. But before I let you go on this one, neutrons are produced by fission. Why can't they do the job themselves of the waste? There is waste which is being produced, neutrons are being produced. There must be something special about the neutrons you are producing by fusion. We need to communicate this to the audience.
Let's try that, okay. Indeed, fission itself can try to attempt to solve the problem of waste. So there is, even Government of India has a program called the fast reactor, and the fast reactors by definition do not produce too much waste, all right. The biggest problem is that since all fission reactors must run critically, it's a very important word, it's technical, but one has to understand. So in fact it uses up all the neutrons it produces, okay. So very often what happens is that you do not have sufficient amount of extra neutrons, and if you do create extra neutrons by some process within fission, right, the safety question becomes much more serious. So what we do is we said, no, let fission operate the way it does, we'll bring some extra help from the sister nuclear channel, right. It's just like one hand washing the other, and it's much easier to produce neutrons from fusion, and then we can make the reactors run what is called subcritically. So it's very safe. Subcriticality can be equated with great safety.
So one more question is that these neutrons in a normal reactor are very slow, or thermal neutrons as they are called. The neutrons that you produce which do the job are slightly different from thermal neutrons, aren't they?
Yes, but that distinction is not terribly relevant, because in fact even the fission neutron, they are not so slow, they are slowed down, okay, by deliberate process of what is called making them interact with water, all right. But and the fusion neutrons are of course very energetic. For this particular game, that's not an advantage. We actually have to slow them down enough, because the neutronicness of the neutron rather than its energy which is relevant. So both the problems which will take care of nuclear energy sins, all right, that is insufficiency as well as the waste, can be taken care of by an external agent which we provide through fusion. And incidentally, there can be many other sources of neutrons, and finally it's going to boil down to this one: who can produce reasonably large number of reasonably cheap neutrons.
Okay, let me ask you another question, because we can't get too technical right now with the audience. You know, the kind of technology that you are proposing should make a sea change for nuclear technology, right?
Yes.
And what I would like to know is that in a country like India, where at the moment we see nothing else on the horizon, because the alternative energies that we talk about, which have a renewable source like the sun and the wind, have only a limited ability to meet our needs. So we will need nuclear energy. Do you think there's really going to be a sea change? And if there is a sea change, should we be looking at technology creation after carrying on about technology transfer? Because it's about time that we took a lead in something of this kind and did a really interesting experiment.
Yeah, I think that you have hit the nail on the head. Of course, every inventor is in love with their own technology. So the fact that if I say it can do a sea change is no big deal. But let me try to make a little bit of a scientific case for that. This is really the architecture for a new technology. It's yet to be translated into practice, okay, both engineering wise as well as economically. So there is a certain window during which the societies which wish to create this technology must jump into it. As we know, there are many societies which are interested in it, and India in fact is one of the countries which could in principle start thinking seriously about this technology. We have a fairly big fission program, we have a growing fusion program, and of course it's the combination of these two which eventually will produce the fusion-fission hybrid. And the sea change in fact is that I can be very crude and put it like that those who get this technology first, they can become the Saudi Arabia of nuclear fuel. Now that's a very tantalizing prospect, and in addition to that, India wants to increase its nuclear energy potential by an enormous amount, 200
So
to 250.
I need to ask you,
Yeah.
the first question is how long will it take, in a rough estimate, to construct a device like the one you are talking about? And secondly, what are the costs and what are the benefits?
Now, a pseudo-scientific prognostication about the time scales is really not my métier, all right? But I will try to say something about it.
A rough idea.
Rough idea. Since the guiding principle of our entire research was to create a near-term technology so that we do not ask for great extrapolations from what exists. In fact, the fission technology that we will use is already there, fully functional. Fusion technology that we demand, which needs to be developed over a period of time, I believe at a sufficiently inspired program with a degree of commitment like India, for instance, has towards the International ITER program, should be able to get us to the stage in about 10 to 15 years. And that's a very short time for a technology of this magnitude.
Okay, so I have to stop you. It's time for a small break, but we'll come back to this issue later. We will be back soon. You are watching Rajya Sabha television. Welcome back to Rajya Sabha television. We are talking to Professor Swadesh Mahajan. So Swadesh, now you have a very interesting name for this device that you've created. It's called the Super X diverter. So why don't you tell us what is so super about it and what's it diverting?
Yes, it's diverting the very hot and energetic particles which are contained in that main part of the magnetic bottle, and it diverts it to a region where some special materials can be put together so that it doesn't destroy everything on its way. All these particles are very, very corrosive in the common language because they are so energetic. Okay? So the most important thing is that if you want your apparatus to stay, these particles have to be taken care of. So they have to be diverted. Why is it Super X diverter? Because there is a big history of diverters in fusion. So you started with what was called the standard diverter. Then there was a new configuration which was called an X diverter. Now we were not going to be left behind. If they had an X diverter, we were going to have a Super X diverter. It basically means that you increase the heat bearing capacity of the system by successive steps. Okay? So our tailoring of the magnetic field has gone several stages more as compared to the conventional tokamak. So superness is measured by its ability that how much factor have you gained as compared to the earlier one. So for instance, the Super X divert could handle 10 times as much energy as the so-called regular divert.
So now let's get to another point. I think we can't get into too many technical issues. You have estimated what is the cost and what is the benefit. And you can perhaps say something about the Indian context, and then we'll come to safety after that. Okay. Or you can take them both together if you like.
Right. I could probably combine them. I don't have the ability to do costing in the Indian context, right? Because I really am not terribly familiar. But in the US context, the fusion module, which is the new thing, one is adding to a fission reactor, that fusion module with all its bells and whistles, including an extra spare element, it can be put together in about $2 to $2.5 billion.
Billion?
2 billion to 2.5
Right.
billion. Yeah.
Let's
No,
not
we are
muffle
not
the word
talking about
million.
millions. You know, we are.
Now, that's not so much compared to our nuclear energy program. It's a small fraction of it.
It's a very small. For instance, today typically the light water reactor, which we are even buying from abroad, they are typically $4 to $6 billion.
So I think we should go for it.
I mean, I couldn't be happier.
Okay, how about safety now? You
Yeah.
know, safety is a huge issue.
Right.
It's the toxic waste that's going to go. But people are very concerned about safety because unfortunately nuclear reactors recently have got hit by supernatural events and have been located at perhaps the wrong place, even designed a little bit wrong. So tell us, what will this do for safety?
There are two questions about safety. Safety of the new reactor which I am proposing and the safety of the old reactors which are functional, right? Now you have to remember that Fukushima reactor was designed in 60s, put together in early 70s, all right? And then again TEPCO, that is the Japanese company, did not file the instructions of GE. There were several inspections during this time that you are too near the sea, you should remove it. In fact, your safety building will be far away from the seaside, but it was right on that one. But you know, let's not make any excuses. Okay, such things can happen, but the current reactor, the today's modern LWR, is at least hundreds and thousands of times safer than anything that you could get from that level. Most important thing, in fact, is the safety issue that you're talking about, and that is that stored nuclear waste on the nuclear site. All right? And if I just dump it in the earth, I don't know how to engineer a system for 100,000 or 1,000,000 years. I don't. You know, that will be a false thing to state that I can take care of it. And then within 100 years, that very dumping site becomes a plutonium mine where almost anyone could walk in and get plutonium to make a bomb. So that's not a choice. Okay, so in order to ensure safety, all right, non-proliferation is an integral part of the whole process. So we must process the waste. We must not dump it as it is. All right, so this is exactly what we are providing, that you must destroy the waste in a proper way by fissioning it and getting energy out of it.
Okay, just one more point.
Yeah.
That this reactor that you have, which is going to produce these extra neutrons, this, as far as I know, runs at subcritical level.
Precisely.
So there is no question of this reactor running away.
Yeah, you have stolen my words. In fact, we run it so subcritically that the chance of its ever getting into accident is almost deterministically awfully small. Not just probabilistically, but deterministically. So what we bring to the scene is a very, very safe reactor, all right? And in fact, its combination with the other reactors also adds to the safety of those reactors.
Okay, very good. Now, is there anything special that you would like to say? For example, you would like to tell everybody at a philosophical level what you call the patrimony of this earth and how we are exploiting these energies. And would you like to say that should we continue with nuclear energy and how long we should continue with it? You know, what are the other issues? I think if we are going to do nuclear energy, we need innovation, and you are providing an innovation. Now, I cannot naturally judge whether this innovation is going to work perfectly, because that only the proof of the reactor is functioning. But we can ask you that another time, but maybe you want to sum this up somehow or the other.
Okay, generally at a more philosophic level, Earth's energy bounty could be put in 4 categories. One is the current account, all right, and that's sun, giving the plants and the animals and the solar energy and the wind energy, or whatever you want to call it. Second is, of course, the savings account, which is what Earth created over the last several 100 million years, and that comes in the form of coal, oil, natural gas, etc. So these are the 2 things which are connected really with the life cycle of the Earth itself. But then there are things that Earth inherited in its very formation. I call them patrimony. Patrimony 1 and patrimony 2. Patrimony 1 is this huge source of what is being used for nuclear fission, uranium and thorium. They are absolutely chock full of energy, all right, and very small amounts of them, a ton of them has the equivalent of 100 million tons of coal. And then there is patrimony 2, and patrimony 2 consists of deuterium, which is there heavy hydrogen in seawater. As we go farther and farther, the energy density of these sources becomes larger and larger. So in fact, there is almost a fatal attraction to go from the fossils to nuclear to fusion. Okay? So the question is there any source of energy that is particularly superior or particularly evil? According to me, no. Fossils were wonderful. They created our industrial civilization, but we have found now that over a long period of time, their very extensive use does create problems. So time has come for us to phase them out, and the only baseload source of electricity at this time we know apart from fossil is nuclear. The question is not whether there is a conflict between renewables and nuclear. No, that's a very invidious comparison. It doesn't make any sense. One should always try to live in one's current income. So if you can do everything from the sun, by all means do it, right? But sensible attitude for any society is to find out the right mix of the various energy sources so that we can create a very dynamic and self-sustaining system. And the most important thing is that our invention has brought nuclear energy to the stage where we can say it can be both green and sustainable.
So I have to thank you for a very interesting account of what is the present status of nuclear energy and which direction it's going in today, and illuminating us with all your knowledge.
Thank you so much.
This is all we have in this episode of To The Point. We will be back again with another interesting personality. Meanwhile, keep watching Rajya Sabha television.